Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How Wellpoint Transformed Resident Move-In with Agentic Orchestration. Today's webinar is sponsored by Camunda with Wellpoint and CapBPM and produced by SmartBrief. My name is Mackenzie Puttasi with SmartBrief, a future B2B company, and I'm excited to be your moderator for this webinar today. Now, resident move-in has long been a manually intensive, fragmented process full of handoffs, missteps, and inconsistent outcomes. Wellpoint set out to change that, and in partnership with CapBPM, they built an intelligent orchestration solution that guides every prospective resident from initial interest through move-in day with full visibility and control at every stage. Today, our panel of esteemed guests will give us an overview of this transformational platform with a mix of data, case studies, anecdotes, as well as a live demo. As you can tell, today is going to be super valuable, and I'm excited to dive into this. Please help me in welcoming to the stage Natasha McNeil, Senior Solutions Marketing Manager for Camunda. And Natasha, welcome. I'm going to let you set the stage a little further and get our other speakers introduced with a little more detail, but great to have you.
All right, thank you. Good day, everyone. We're so excited to have this discussion today. We want to thank you all for taking a little bit of time out of your day. Today, we're going to talk about resident move-in and how Camunda and CapBPM work together with Wellpoint. Resident move-in is a textbook example of where the automation ceiling shows up. You talk about long-running, multi-system, regulated with multiple handoffs between systems and humans that nobody really owns from end to end. 71% of organizations are using AI agents, but only 11% of these use cases reached production last year. So resident move-in is not immune to this. The gap is not the agents, it's the orchestration around them. Today, we're going to be talking about how agentic orchestration as the hybrid model that combines deterministic processes where compliance and consistency matter with agent reasoning, where flexibility and natural language access adds value. One platform, not two. That's the key to remember here. What you're about to hear is one of the cleanest examples of agentic orchestration in production today, and let me introduce the people who built it. Today, we have Terry Camerlengo as the Director of Technology at Wellpoint and Lead Architect on RAP. And then we also have Max Young, the CEO of CapBPM. We are so excited to have CapBPM as a Camunda Platinum partner and implementation partner who helped Wellpoint move fast. I'm going to hand it off to Terry now. We're going to jump into what we're all here for.
Great. Thank you so much, Natasha. I appreciate that. It's great to be here. Thank you. I'm based here in Columbus, Ohio, for those in the Midwest. Wellpoint also has offices in Chicago, and our facilities are in California. So this presentation is a version of what we gave at CamundaCon a month ago. And some of the slides are by our CEO, George Kutinarian. So he's not able to be here today, so I'm just going to do my best to channel my inner George and to go through his slides as well as ours. So this first slide was his, and he talked about Wellpoint itself. So Wellpoint is a leading provider of boutique-style residential assisted living, and last year we launched Wellpointe Labs as part of Wellpoint, and Wellpointe Labs is what I'm the director of, and this is where we do all our custom software development, our automation work, our Camunda business process modeling is part of Wellpointe Labs. Wellpoint, the company, is just growing rapidly. Like, we've been part of the Inc. 5000 3 years in a row, and we went from like 1,200 2 years ago to like 690 last year. So, and our revenue is growing rapidly. We're under like really massive growth at this point. And this is one of the reasons why technology and automation is so important. Like, how do we scale our business, efficiently? There are a few themes at the business level that we should just call out really quickly. One theme is that in the industry, in the healthcare industry, and this is me channeling my inner George, the healthcare industry, AI adoption is wide but shallow. What does that mean? Seems like a lot of companies are using AI technologies like large language models, coding assistants, ChatGPT to help do their work, but they're not really developing their own AI models. So like, you don't see a lot of people like, maybe not as much like developing their own custom language models or machine learning classifiers, people using techniques like we're going to talk about today, things like RAG and MCP and agentic orchestration. That's like a deeper use of AI adoption. So that's something we'll talk a little bit about today. Another concept here is this idea of traditional citizen development and how low code is dead. Just an anecdote, like 20 years ago, we would often buy load testing products off the shelf because, load testing was a very complicated process and you would spend a lot of money for those. But just last week, I had to write a load testing tool and I did it with Claude in like a day. And, the real question is like now with, AI coding systems it's becoming so powerful and increasingly like effective, there's a lot of opportunities where you don't really need to, use a platform. So like, this idea of low code, is it really something that is going to be challenged by coding assistants, or is it something that will evolve with them? So there's a poll question, and I'd like to see what other people think about that. Natural language and our agentic orchestration models, using things like RAG and MCP, we're going to talk about that today. But this is really where the UI and the interface between the user and the application changes. And large language models are giving us this opportunity to choose language now instead of like, user interfaces. And one thing that we did, and I think this is a theme at Camunda and BPM in general, but it's this idea of augmenting or building a process that combines both deterministic elements with dynamic elements or agentic elements. So this is something that we did for this residential admission process and something that we'll talk about today. And I think now is a good time for the poll results. So what do we get here? So most people said no idea. So how low does low code go? No idea. There seems to be equal, depends on the domain, and low code is entering a renaissance. So that's fair. Okay. Okay. So residential admission. This is basically moving a resident into one of our assisted care facilities. This was a manual process. You don't have to read the boxes, but the big picture here is you have like 8 swim lanes or 8 different roles and something like 25 to 30 individual tasks. Moving into an assisted living facility is not like moving into an apartment. There are literally all sorts of regulatory requirements. There are insurance issues, things like just preparing the room for each resident. Some residents have mobility issues. They may have dementia. There's all sorts of concerns, and we need to really capture and handle all of this. So this is a very complicated process, and it was really difficult manually to sort of, to manage this process. It's like herding cats. There's all these different people involved, all these different steps, and it could take a long time. Like this process could take over a month. So it's really hard to keep track of it. And with that, I would like to hand it off to my partner here, Max Young of CapBPM, to discuss this next slide. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Max Young. I'm the CEO of CapBPM. We are a platinum partner with Camunda, and not to brag, but the partner of the year for the American continent 3 years in a row. I guess I did brag. So I think the thing that I sort of want to point out is the vision that Terry and George had here was the idea of sort of bringing in one ring to rule them all, right? This idea that you want a central orchestration mechanism that can kind of bring the experience of your people together, standardize it, scale it, improve it without being disruptive. And I think that's where Camunda really fit the bill for them. I think, one of the things that Terry will talk about, which I think was incredibly innovative, is rather than sort of telling people, their users, that they had to go to this portal and this new UI and training them. They met those people where they're at, right? They were able to say, oh, you're using Slack, just keep using Slack. You're using Monday, just keep using Monday. Behind the scenes, Terry and his team using Camunda were able to sort of orchestrate the machinations that were making it all possible and scalable and reliable. And I think, I love the technology. I'm a deep core technologist, but when you sort of look back at the big picture, this idea of helping people without being disruptive, without causing them to rework everything that they're doing, fitting into the culture of an organization, I think that's really compelling, and that's where I think Camunda has really helped them. And frankly, we're happy to have been a small part of it. That we were a small part of it, and a lot of it is the innovation that Terry implemented and George envisioned.
Thank you, Max. Okay, to continue, a few technical themes, very high level themes that I think really highlight what this project was about, like at a high level. We used something called MCP, and both MCP stands for Model Context Protocol. I'll go into more detail in a few slides, but I think the really big takeaway was how Camunda and AWS came together to help us realize that solution. And so we'll explore in a few slides, we'll explore MCP and RAG use cases and how that works with Camunda and AWS. The other thing is, this might be I think this is novel, I don't know, but the use of Monday as a rapid prototyping tool. So it turns out that we use Monday everywhere through our company, and so everyone knows how it works. And when we started this process, we really wanted to focus on the back end. We wanted to sort of kick the tires on the business process and the back end, and we didn't want to spend a lot of time building a custom web app. So we're just really looking for a way to quickly get this up and running and integrate it with our Camunda and AWS processes without building a lot of front end. So this is why we used Monday, and I would like to share that too during this and talk about how that went. And then I think the constant theme is how Camunda and AWS work really well together. Camunda gives you a lot of support for agentic orchestration, and it blends really well with it. They go really well together, and I think that combination was really great, especially with AWS serverless. I thought that was something I like to touch on as well as we move forward. So, okay, so this is the business process. I think there's a poll here, but let me just say that this business process represents the manual process that I showed a few slides earlier. So it's much more streamlined. I think it's more understandable, but maybe not. I think that's a question to sort of ponder. Let's look at this a little bit. So the first thing I want to sort of challenge people a little here and talk about, what is an agent? I think there's a lot of discussion about what is an agent actually. What is it? So I read this book from the co-founder and chief technologist Bernd Rucker from Camunda, and he defined an agent as an agent is a potentially long-running software entity that can interpret goals, decide on actions, use tools, and adapt its behavior based on intermediate results with varying degrees of autonomy. That's a really good definition, but I want a slightly different definition. I want to say that a agent, just for purposes of this talk, is essentially a dynamic process in your business process. So for me, it's an ad hoc subprocess. Maybe a lot of people don't agree with that, but I think the ad hoc subprocess is sort of the linchpin of agentic orchestration. And what we did in this process is we modeled a deterministic process, and we embedded it with dynamic elements or agents. And each agent corresponds to a stage in our business process. So we would group a bunch of those tasks that we saw a few slides earlier into logical groups, and we would give that off to an agent. So if you look at this, if you're able to read this business, you'll notice there's a few steps here with ad hoc subprocesses or agents that kind of encapsulate a lot of the complexity of the process. So the real question is, there's this level within this business process that is not actually transparent, or you have to dig a little bit to get to it. So it's underneath, it's in the ad hoc subprocess. And I'll show you one of those next. But that's basically the question I had, I think, for the poll is, do you feel like the addition of a dynamic process or an agent in a deterministic process simplifies the business process or makes it more complex? So I think that was the question. And okay, everyone said more complex. Interesting. Okay, so there you go. I think less complex, but that's an interesting. Everyone thought that. Okay, good. We can move on. Okay. I could talk a little bit about this process, the way that it's kicked off. We have a CRM called Welcome Home. When a new resident registers for one of our facilities, they send an email. We have an email handler in AWS called SES. It's Simple Email Service. It receives this email, kicks off an automation in AWS that creates the Camunda process. And that Camunda process will then add that resident to the first stage of this business process. And it also goes on our Monday board on the first stage. I'll show you that soon. And then as they advance through the business process, at the very end here on the right, there's some guardrails. So we check to make sure before we admit the patient officially, once they're admitted, they plug into other systems. So before we do that, we check to make sure that there's a list of things that have been done. So this is a little bit of a governance guardrail step at the very end. Okay, so here, this is what Monday as a UI looks for. So again, we used Monday to be a rapid prototyping tool. And we did this because we already have users. They already know how to use Monday. They're very familiar with it. And Camunda happens to have a GraphQL connector. So GraphQL is the way that you integrate with Monday. So you could query Monday with GraphQL. You could do updates. And so the GraphQL connector in Camunda works very well with Monday. So if you can see on the left, we have like these stages, these sections: admission and signing date set, admission day, admitted. These correspond to the agents in our business process. So each one of those is an agent. And on the right, you'll see if we expand one of those sections, it's kind of like a spreadsheet. And it tells you what residents are there. And on the right, these columns in the spreadsheet kind of mean these are the tasks that have to be done. And every time a task is completed, Monday has a webhook that calls Camunda and says, hey, this task just got done, and Camunda updates the process. And then when all the steps within a task are done, they move to the next stage or the next agent in the business process. So this is what one of the agents or ad hoc subprocesses look like. Within this process, within the subprocess of this agent, there's a few human manual tasks that have to be done, and then there's a few automated tasks. So on the right, I have all the Camunda connectors that we had to use to achieve this. To communicate with AWS, we use a REST outbound connector. We also send notifications out in email and Slack. There's connectors for that. And there's a webhook task connector in Monday that Monday can communicate with Camunda. And so that's how that works. So basically what happens is and we have a demo of this, but when a user comes in and says, okay, I set the transportation for this resident that's moving in, that triggers a callback into Camunda, and this task here, transportation column set, gets marked as completed. And that's what the agent does. So this slide, this is about Camunda 8.9 and agentic automation. I'd like to hand this off to Max so he could discuss this. Thank you.
So this is actually just this is kind of a look under the hood, right? This is just one level deeper in terms of how Camunda enables this. And specifically what Camunda does is that it does orchestration exactly as Jerry said, but Under the scenes, what it does is that it has a mechanism for pulling in intelligent document processing. So for example, someone sends you a PDF and you need like the third column and the second tab and it's a date format, but it's European. It just knows how to do that, right? Or doing intelligent decisioning platforms where you can have a combination of intuitive decision making along with decisions that are more structural, right? What are called expert systems. Pulling in your AI and ML systems, or artificial intelligence and machine learning systems, running with different LLMs. So whether it is ChatGPT or Perplexity or Grok or Claude or whatever it is that you like, allowing you to integrate with your existing system APIs, right? So hey, we have an API that gets information out of our database for people who live in Florida. Being able to literally work with bots. And I don't just mean bots in the way that we think of them, like go clean my spam email. We have customers who are literally controlling literal giant robots using this platform, right? Like in warehouses, these things that lift like, tens of thousands of pounds are going and doing this and the other because the Camunda system and the LLM behind the scene was telling them to do it, right? It is shocking the amount of adoption and the things that you can do here. The thing that I always like to say is this. If you think about the English language, it's actually not a very complicated language, right? There are 26 letters in it. There are other alphabets that have many more. But within those 26 letters, you can have the entire works of William Shakespeare and Walt Whitman and the great speeches of the people in the past and the Constitution and everything else you've ever read or said. 26 letters allow you to do that. There are about maybe 11 widgets here, but these 11 widgets give you the grammar and the structure to be able to tell both the story of the problem that you want to solve and the solution, the happy ending to that story. And I think that really, just at an aesthetic level, is really appealing to me. So that's sort of what I get out of this. So again, it's slightly technical. We're looking under the hood a little bit, but the ramifications of this are highly practical, which is that you can solve your idiosyncratic problems in the way that you want to solve them, not by going and doing something, foreign. Oh, come to this new portal and we're going to have 3 months of training and that sort of thing. That's all.
Very good. Thank you. So next, I'd like to talk a little bit about these concepts of MCP and RAG. MCP and RAG are two protocols, techniques for extending. We used it within our ad hoc subprocess or agentic orchestration. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and RAG, I think, is Retrieval Augmented Generation. I actually don't know what those terms mean, but I know what the technologies do. So let's start with MCP. Now we looked at both of these and how Camunda and AWS could achieve these. In this particular use case, we only used MCP, but I'm going to talk about both of them because we researched both. And so MCP is really ideal in situations where you have very structured input and output. Think API calls, database queries, CLI calls. The payload, the input is structured, the output is structured. Also, they're real time. Things can be updating all the time. RAG is more like a corpus. It's a way to store a repository of documents. It's a point in time. It's not live. It's not real time. And also it works very well with unstructured data. So imagine you have a repository of like legal cases or documented legal briefs or maintenance documents. They might be in PDFs. They might be in text. And you just want to search those. RAG is really good. You want to search them using natural language. So you just ask a question and it'll kind of, LLM will manage that interaction between the corpus and that's achieved through vector databases and embeddings. So those are the two sort of basic technologies that we would look at. So just at a high level, MCP versus RAG. So MCP, again, like you basically would ask a question. The agent will get the question. It'll see it. Can I answer this question myself, or do I need to use a tool? If it needs to recruit a tool, it'll go and it'll contact an MCP server. MCP server has annotations. It'll decide which tool can best handle this question. It'll get the results and then formulate it and hand it back to the user. RAG is a little more complex. RAG, you have two steps. You have one, you have to build this corpus, this vector database. The second is you can query it. So the first thing you do is you get all your documents, your PDF, your web files, whatever they are. You clean them up. So you might have a data engineering process that cleans them up. You split them into what they call chunks. You invoke an embedding model like Titan to sort of vectorize them. You put them in a vector store, and then there they live. And then when someone has a question, basically the same thing happens to the question. The question is converted into embeddings. It's searched against this vector store. They use some machine learning to find what is the best way to, what is the closest segment. It returns that, it decodes it, then the LLM hands off the result. So those are the two processes at a high level. Just a little more about RAG, then we'll move on. In Camunda, you would use the embeddings vector DB outbound connector, and that would be useful as a client to talk to a vector database. And in AWS, there are technologies like Agent Core knowledge bases and Open Search, I think is the other one. And these are the vector database, the corp where you would store the corpus in AWS. So the Camunda is the client here, AWS would be the server. AWS makes this really easy with knowledge bases. You can just basically drop these files into an S3 bucket and their pipeline kind of takes it over. If you use just a vector database, it's a little bit harder. You have to build that pipeline yourself, but you could, depending on your needs, you could do either. And Camunda integrates really well with these. So that being said, why are we even thinking about MCP and RAG? We decided to have a companion process with this residential admission process, and that is a chatbot. We have information in an EHR, we have information in a CRM, we have information in Monday, we have information in Camunda. We also have now information in a note-taking service, and the idea is we don't want people to go to 10 different systems to ask a question. So the idea is, can we just have a Slack bot where someone goes to Slack bot, ask a question, let the Camunda agent figure out how to handle it. If it has to go wherever it has to go, it'll figure it out and it'll give you the right answer. And we can add many different paths to this in the future. So this is a very robust way of developing like a user interaction with a Slack bot. So all this stuff is really new. This is an aside, but all this stuff is very new. I think Agent Core has been less than 6 months, and only 8.9 has had some of these connectors for connecting to MCP and RAG. So this is all very new. So when I was working on this, I got things working in AWS and decided, I want to terraform this and script this out. So I was asking Claude to help me do this. And this was an answer Claude gave me. It came back and said, yeah, you're right. Sorry, the agent gateway is too new for native Terraform resources. And I basically had to end up writing my own scripts using the CLI. But I thought this was kind of telling that some of this stuff is so cutting edge that not even like the language models and Terraform have the information on how to do it. So just something to kind of ponder there. So this is the companion process. This is how the agentic AI chatbot works. The big key here is this box in the middle. This is the agent. And here is what I think is so interesting about this. And this is all new in Camunda 8.9. But here's the big thing. We have information in our systems, like I said, the CRM and the EHR. We also have informations in Camunda. Camunda has their own MCP server. So you can ask all kinds of questions about the process, about the cluster stat, et cetera, et cetera. And then we have another MCP server. So instead of just having one MCP client, we had 2 MCP clients and 2 MCP servers. And it's possible in the future we can add a RAG agent, a RAG component to this. And what we want the agent to do is figure out, how do we direct this work? Like what server, what resource? So this is much more powerful than just having a single MCP client with a single MCP service. We're using an agent to basically delegate which MCP resource, in this case, to use. So I think that was kind of a neat thing to do there. And we used Bedrock for our agents, LLM, and we used obviously Agent Core's MCP server and Camunda's MCP connector to achieve this. So how does an MCP client know which MCP tool to use? So I copied this right from code. This is literally from the code base. It's just English language. It's just natural language. You basically tell it, use this tool when you want to do this. So when we have a question about care needs, clinical traits, background, use this tool. But don't use this tool for insurance information. Use this one instead. Or for workflow status, use this one instead. So the LLM, the MCP client actually reads this and can determine how to delegate the question or what tool to use. So that is very practical. I think it's all very understandable. There's also something that's kind of neat that when I first started doing this, we were asking questions and we were getting these really long-winded answers. And I just kind of thought, like, is there a way to just shut it up a little? It's very chatty, So there's a conciseness setting that you could put into the prompt. So like when I asked it, does John Doe require glucometer testing? Like it would say, based on CRM results, John Doe, there's no glucometer trait, blah, 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 blah. But all I really wanted to say was no glucometer frequency information was found for John Doe. So that's a very concise answer. And that was in the, this is how you would do it. You would just you would tell it in a prompt, give the answers directly and concisely, give the shortest possible answer. And that was enough to let it transform its response. Okay, so Max is going to talk about the non-negotiables here. So I'm going to hand it off to Max. Take it away.
So I don't know if I would say these are non-negotiables exactly, but we've been doing this for about 4 years actively in terms of helping customers embrace AI and automation. And we are starting to see a pattern, which is not just the stuff that's ahead of you, not the stuff that's obvious, but sort of building an environment that fosters the adoption of AI-centric thinking and being able to sort of have the tools that you need. It's a little bit like an IKEA project, right? So you don't want to get up and go and find like the exact screwdriver that you need, like when you're in the middle of it, right? You kind of want to have the things that you need laid out there so that when you get to that point, you're not breaking your flow. And so the things that sort of we see that I think are sort of germane here are the things that you'll eventually get to. You may do it, informally, but you're going to get here, right? So one, exactly as Terry said, you want to start thinking about owning your data, right? So you want to be running LLMs and your VPC, your own prompts, and your own data sets, right? Llama, Minstrel, Mixtral, Quen, whatever you like. Start thinking about the fact that you don't want to be leasing, you want to be owning your proprietary business data, and you want it to inform your decision making. So you've got to set up an infrastructure for that. How do I capture it? What do I capture? How do I weigh it? How do I consume it? How do I test it, right? So just adopt something and start using it. And if it's not right, you'll make a change. And that means also curating your business data, right? So there's a difference between signal and noise. And if you just start throwing everything into the logs, it's like when you throw everything in the closet. You're never going to want to go in there. So just be a little discriminating as you're thinking about, why is this data important to me? Well, it's got 7 things. Well, 3 of those are really important. Let's think about those. And you want to start thinking about things like using Camunda to track the information, whether you put that in Snowflake or Iceberg or Delta Lake or whatever you like. You want to have some way of saying, oh, this is a good idea. I should remember this. You want to start thinking about vector databases as a core infrastructure. I don't want to go into what that is if you don't know, but if you have 5 minutes, Google them. They will help you a lot. you also want to think about what Terry said, which was this idea of letting expert systems and intelligence systems work together to reason for you, right? So typically in automation world, there's been this sort of dichotomy between expert systems, which are sort of rules that you write that are very static, right? Like if the person's credit score is over 700 and they make over $200,000 a year and they want a 30-year loan, then approve it for this much money. Right? That's sort of an expert system. And then, you have more intelligent systems that are like, oh, well, no, this is Terry. He's been working the same job for 27 years and he's a pillar of his community and we can approve his loan because we have a sense that, he'll pay it off. The idea is to sort of combine these things, right? So Terry had a great example of this where he was saying, well, we look at the kind of question that's being asked. And then depending on that, we start routing it to the right AI agent because that has the particular expertise that we're looking for, the cost that we're looking for. So you want to start thinking about this combination of having structure and having flexibility and thinking about how those things fit together. And that's really where orchestration sort of comes in, right? So you want to let Camunda control the flow, the retries, the escalations, but the specific thing that you do, use your AIs for that kind of stuff. And then finally, just going back to 5th grade where they taught us all the scientific process, you've got to be thinking about observability, cost controls, and kill switches, right? How do I know when I'm right? How do I know when I'm wrong? You got to establish that ahead of time before you get invested in the outcome and you start kind of putting your thumb on the scale. No, this was actually a good result. No, if it was a good result, you would have said so at the beginning, right? You've got to start thinking about being really disciplined with yourself about not tracking just vanity statistics, but making sure that you're tracking things that really matter to your business, right? So, for example, Terry and Wellpoint could have measured, well, how much automation are we doing, right? We've automated 17 processes or whatever the case may be. But that doesn't really help the bottom line. You know what helps the bottom line? How much time are we saving our staff? What are they able to do now that they weren't able to do before, right? That is an honest, useful metric. And that's going to give you a lot more in terms of visibility and guidance so you know where you want to go. And, like I said, this was Terry and Wellpoint and George's success. We're a small part of it. But I do think that there is a place for organizations like ours, which I think of as Sherpas, to help you understand, well, we understand you're going up Everest, but this path is kind of, the way to go in this season, and this one is a little treacherous, and by the way, you should do this with your boots, right? So it doesn't have to be us, but you should find someone that you trust that can help advise you as you're going on your automation journey, because you don't necessarily want to be a pioneer in every sense of the word. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Max. Very good. So I think we have a final poll. Let's see. Okay, so so what is your organization's biggest concern related to agentic process orchestration? And the most popular response was that there's a few of them. So some people feel it's a black box, and that's true. And I think the next version of Camunda is going to work towards making the decisions that the agent is making more transparent, more auditable, more auditing of cost. But so that is a concern. And then other people felt like deterministic processes are reliable, although they introduce unpredictability that is not well suited for most problems. So those are the two. So right now we have a short demo, and I'll just show you how all this stuff comes together. I'm going to do a screen share. Okay, so let's see here. It should be coming. Okay, there you go. Okay, so this is a demo of how our Monday board works with Camunda and sort of seeing a real process, sort of go from beginning to end. And then we're also going to show the chatbot too. So right now, this is the Monday board, and each one of the stages on the left correspond to agents in our process. And these are all the tasks, some of them automated, some of them manual, that information that's useful for users to decide. So some of these things where you see the color coding, that's that's where an agent would have, a person would have to like fill that in. So a process has been kicked off in the background. We received the email, and AWS Lambda is going to create a user here. And there it is. So the process was created, and it added John Doe to that first step. And you can see this is where we are in the process. We've gone to this stage. And now it's just going to wait until certain things are completed in the Monday board to move it to the next stage. So now I'm going to go into the subprocess. So this is, so you can see where the icons are. It's waiting for these transportation columns set. The other things like Dropbox, the automated tasks have already been completed. Those were fired off to AWS as soon as the agent entered this stage of the process. So John Doe here, you can see he's on the left there. And now a person is going to set the transportation. And if you go back to the process, you'll see that the agent receives this, and there should be an update here soon. So now you can see how there's the gray. Now it's waiting on the next one, which is restricted condition column set. Yeah, and so we'll go to the next. We're gonna go to this column, and we're gonna set that. This again, Monday does a webhook. It calls the Camunda, and it's now going to complete this entire step. So both of them are grayed now, and now we go to this notification, which sends some Slack messages and emails out. So now we should be at the next agent. Now we're at the next agent in this process, which is we're preparing for admission day. So that's how it works all the way through the end until we get to admit it. And now you notice that Camunda has moved that individual from the first stage to the next. So when people log in, they can see, oh yeah, here's John Doe. This is what has to, here's the step. Here's the work we have to do with John Doe. Now I'd like to show you the chatbot. So while this is happening, this could take weeks. People could interrogate and ask the system questions as we go. So here I'm just going to ask a basic question. When is John Doe's move-in date? And it came back and told me, oh, his move-in date is June 1st, 2026. This happened in the past. And then I asked, I want to know, is this person married? This is personal information. And you can see the agent here is taking that question and it's redirecting it to our agent, our MCP server that we built. So like that's where the green icon is right there. And we'll now ask, it told us the answer. It said, oh, John Doe is single. So I'm going to ask another question. You notice now, like, I don't have to actually say John Doe anymore because it remembers that context. So I'm just going to say, does he have any hobbies? So now it's going to go back. It's waiting here for another question. It'll go back to the agent, and it's going to ask, it's going to redirect the question to the Welcome Home CRM. This is another MCP tool. And there it is. So now it's going to answer that question. Sometimes MCP can be a little slow because it's an API call, but it responded and said, yeah, John Doe, he likes movies, blah, blah, blah. So now it's back here. It's waiting for the next question. I ask another one. Has he been assigned a room yet? I want to know where this person is going to stay. So now, again, it goes back and it's going to ask the same question. So it's basically using. So the agent is deciding where to direct the query. And then within that, there's also a number of tools that that MCP client can utilize. So now it's answering, I'm asking another question about restricted conditions. It'll give us that answer. Here we have about a minute left. And so these are good questions that have to do with the resident. And you can see how the LLM, the agent, is responding in very nice English form. But there's another use case where we might be curious about Camunda events. Like I want to know, like for troubleshooting, hey, we had an error in our ticketing system. Let me query the state of the Camunda process in Camunda. Let's look at that MCP server. So now I'm asking questions that are more related to Camunda. Like what is the process instance key? And then once I get that, so this is actually going to Monday because we put that information on Monday. So that tool, and now it gives us the process instance key. And now I can go to Camunda and say, hey, here's a process instance key. Give me a little information about this process. And so it'll hit a different MCP server. It'll hit the Camunda MCP server. It should. There it is. There you can see it's asking, and this is how Camunda responded. And there's all sorts of questions you could ask with Camunda. And we could extend this to, we could put other tools in here, like we could put a RAG tool or whatever other options here. So this is very growable. This agent can do a lot more. But so yeah, that's basically it. So I hope that was clear, helpful. And I think with that, we can have some questions.
Thank you both to Terry and Max. That was a great overview. We are excited to wrap up this session. Before we go to the Q&A, let me give you 5 things that are worth remembering. Number 1, hybrid orchestration is what gets agents into production. Deterministic is where it must be consistent, but agentic is where it can flex. 2, the orchestrator is the control plane, not the agent. Camunda governs, agents participate. 3, natural language replaces UIs, not orchestration. 4, agents need instruction, not training. And 5, like Max said, orchestration before agents multiply. Get the layer right before you add more agents. Thank you for this wonderful discussion. Now I'm going to send it back over to Mackenzie for Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks, Natasha. Alrighty, so I'm going to bring Max and Terry back up here. We're going to answer as many of your questions as we have time for here as we wrap up the webinar. So Max, welcome back. Terry, I've got you here too. Feel free to claim a question depending if it pertains more to one of you than the other, or if you both want to pitch in on an answer, that works well. But first question I've got in the queue is, how long did this take from concept to production?
So that's a great question. So the UI took a couple days. It was that easy to build a Monday board. That's why we used it. The backend took a little bit longer, building out all the AWS integrations, and that probably took about a month and a half, 2 months.
Perfect. Okay, next one I've got is, what systems did you have to integrate exactly?
Yeah, so there was a CRM system that we had to use called Welcome Home. Obviously, all the AWS serverless work, and then on Monday in Slack. Those are the systems that we use, and we have a EHR also that we pull information from.
Okay, and then in terms of APIs, how do you handle a system without using API?
So there has to be some way to integrate with the external system. So Monday had GraphQL queries. If it's a database, we would use SQL connector. We were lucky in the situation that our CRM and EHR had APIs, so we were able to use that.
Yeah, I want to kind of double click on that. So it's not that there are no APIs. It's actually kind of the opposite. It's that the APIs become very easy to use, because the agents, using MCP can sort of weave them together, right? So you can say things like, John Smith came in, and, the MCP would know, John Smith. Hey, do I have a John Smith in my record? I'm going to go look him up. And Terry probably wants to know, where he is right now and how long he's been a resident and so on and so forth. So it actually does that work for you. It's like it's got common sense, right?
That's great.
That's actually the useful part of it to me. It's the opposite of not using APIs. It's using APIs so easily that you forget that APIs are complicated.
I like that. And I think that happens with technology as it gets more refined. It's sort of something you're actively using, and then it falls into a lower level, and then eventually it's like, I don't know, they're down there somewhere doing what they do.
Yeah.
Okay, so question around, is this just for senior living, or does this pattern apply elsewhere?
I mean, I'll start that one. So the pattern applies literally everywhere. And here's what I mean by that. When you think about the enterprise, you have heterogeneous systems interacting with multiple roles. So what that means is that basically any sort of a business is got to bring together various technologies, get insights from people on how those technologies should work together, and achieve a business purpose. So by definition, you are already solving a business process problem. The fact that it works for Terry and for Wellpoint is a reflection of George's vision in being able to apply this for what he's doing. But this is a car. It could drive you anywhere you want to go. That doesn't have to be Florida. Nothing against Florida.
Fair. Okay, I love that. Question here about what does this cost versus hiring more staff?
I don't know yet. We don't really have that data yet. Yeah.
Okay.
But I think that definitely this is, I would anticipate that this would be a savings because some things that were manual are now automated, and it's a little easier to keep track of all these different things than before. So it may, I don't know what the cost is going to fall out, but it's going to allow us to grow and add a lot more support for more residents, more move-in processes, because now we can scale.
Perfect.
Yeah, actually, let me jump in on that. So, in the business world, we always talk about opportunity risk, right? So if we do this thing, we don't get to do this other thing, right? I feel like this has kind of opened up the world of opportunity, because you can go from idea to like working implementation in a couple of days, as Terry said, right? And in the other world, in the corporate world, before COVID and ChatGPT, that was like months of just analysis and people meeting and BAs and all this other kind of stuff. So what I think that does is it allows you to unlock the opportunity that was behind the current opportunity. And I think that is really, really important. And I think from a cost and benefit perspective, it's not just the dollars to dollars perspective of what you're spending here versus what you're spending there. It is what you're getting out of it. I think that's really, really critical. I had one of my staff reach out to me and say, I had him use Claude, and he was like, oh man, this is so powerful. You're not going to need me anymore. I said, no, I'm not going to be able to live without you because you're going to be literally 10 times more productive. And how could I live without that?
I like that. Good response.
Yeah, this is really about scaling. Like this will allow us to go from like 400 residents to 1,500. Whereas manually, we wouldn't be able to do that. Even if you could just hire one person to do the whole thing, maybe you save a little money, but then you wouldn't be able to have the capacity to grow. So this is why we're doing it.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I know we've just got technically a minute left, but I'm going to sneak in maybe one or two questions if you guys can stick around for just a couple extra minutes and then we'll wrap. But someone was asking, what's the team size and skill mix needed to maintain something like this?
Yeah, that's great. So to build it, it was one of CapBPM's very talented consultants, Chris Miller, who was the brains behind the BPM modeling, and I was the resource mostly behind the AWS side. And I think moving forward, it won't be a full-time job to maintain it, but probably it'll be like one or two people that, I don't know how many hours a week that so less than one FTE, I think, to maintain this.
Okay, great. So I know George didn't make it on the call today, but if you're able, I want to ask, what would he say is the most important takeaway for a CEO weighing this as an option?
I should know that. I think he would say the scaling factor and how we can use automation to push all of our other processes. We have like probably 5 to 10 core processes in our business, and our goal is ultimately to connect. So once residential admission is done, now there's like literally another process that picks up the resident. So like I think being able to sort of visualize the entire business as a set of processes, so at any given moment when we get there, we're not there yet, you can have a dashboard that shows you what is the state of our business, how are all these things interrelated. I think that's ultimately the main goal.
Perfect. Well, Terry, Max, anything you want to leave the audience with, either just sort of some key takeaways, or if anyone's excited to reach out, follow up, anywhere you can direct them.
I will say this. Terry was very sort of open and said, well, I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is. Just for anyone listening, Terry has 2 master's degrees, one in bioinformatics and the other in AI. This is a place he knows incredibly well, and it's one of the reasons he was able to be so successful in adopting this and being able to separate out, what's practical and what's BS. I think the value of having the right person driving the car is incredibly critical. So as people are here or thinking about, hey, should I use this platform or should I use that platform? Make sure you find yourself a Terry, right? Make sure you find someone who has the vocabulary and the experience and the intuition to understand what they're looking at.
Well, thank you very much. If I could just add, CapBPM has been a great partner, and also just get started. Like these agentic processes, I think they are very expandable. Like just start out with something like in our case, we have 2 MCP servers in there. We could easily extend those agents to do more and more and more, but you got to start somewhere. And even if you make a mistake, it's okay. Like, you just pick it up and you learn from that. And so.
Perfect. Perfect, Terry. Max, thank you so much. Guess I'm getting emotional over here. Thank you for everything. And if there's any questions that snuck in there that we didn't have time for, we're going to pass those on to you, gentlemen, so you can follow up offline. But otherwise, really appreciate the time and all the learnings here.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mackenzie. Thank you, Diana. Thank you, Natasha.
Pleasure.